Presenter this afternoon. He was first elected to the 16th State Senate District in 1984. After going back to the private sector for many years, he came back in 2010 to serve 4 more terms until he was tapped by Bob Stefanowski to run as his lieutenant governor in 2018. And if you ask me, I think he should have ran for governor in 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the first person to join CTRA while holding elected office, the Honorable Joe Markley.
Thank you, folks. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to see such a great turnout, too. I was delighted to walk into the room and see all you people. And my old sign, my goodness, I haven't seen that one for a while. Yeah, I'll say something about that. You know, you come to trust your campaign team at a certain point, and I still remember the day the sign showed up, 5,000 of them or something, and I said, my goodness, they're red. No one even asked me about it before, but it was the right color, obviously. Hey, I was just in Milford this week giving a Lincoln Day speech, and I said at that point how happy I was to be able to talk about history, which I love to talk about, instead of current events, which are dismal. And I said at that point that the world looks as bad to me right now as it ever has in my entire life. And I didn't have to talk about it on Wednesday, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit today. Some of you are old enough to remember Johnny Carson. And I remember Johnny, one of the bits was that Johnny would come out and he'd say, boy, it was a hot day today in Burbank. And Ed McMahon, and the audience would immediately be into it, and Ed McMahon would say, how hot was it, right? And he'd say, it was so hot, I saw a robin dip its worm in nesty. That's the only one I can remember. I don't know why I remember that one. Anyways, I want to say about the situation in this country, in this world, how bad is it? It's bad enough that I worry about the stability and the credibility of our currency, something that never happened to me before. It's bad enough that we don't trust our elections, left or right, anymore, something that I never saw happen in America in the 20th century that's now common in the 21st century. It's bad enough, I'm surprised every week that goes by that the stock market hasn't crashed or the economy hasn't slumped terribly. And that's not the worst of it. I remember in the early 1960s when I was a little kid, people building bomb shelters, and the old duck and cover in the field that there was going to be war at any moment. I feel that we're closer to a nuclear war right now than we ever were in my lifetime, and we're almost sleepwalking into it. And that's not the worst of it. What's going on overseas? The worst of it is always going to be what's happening in America, because if we are strong here and strong in ourselves, we can stand up to anything, as we've proven. But if we crumble here in America, we're finished and the world is finished. A big percentage of the country has no idea why we feel a fidelity to the Constitution. They have no idea why our history should be revered, as our tremendous speaker pointed out earlier today. The ideals that united us, we're a diverse nation, fine. But we've got to have something that unites us. And what unites us are our ideals. This country is built on an idea. It's not based on race. It's not based on geography. It's not based on religion. It's based on shared ideals, which we are losing. And even that's not the worst. It's what I see in the rising generation. That we have suddenly students who want to be told what to do. I can't think of anything more unnatural. They want to follow orders. They want collective action. They demand it, not to be individuals, but to be ruled. And we've reached a state of confusion where the clearest things in life, say the difference between the sexes, for one, are now a matter of debate. I don't have to tell you that. I didn't come here to get people to nod their heads in agreement. I mean, I know it's a natural thing to do. The question, having seen that, is always going to be what is to be done. And let me say, some people say we got to separate as a country. We can't separate as a country. I've spent a lot of time in Spain, and Spain is a country whose history I'm very fond of and I know reasonably well. They had a civil war there 85 years ago or so. And we had a civil war that was terrible, but at least it was on geographic lines. At least it was basically the North against the South. The worst of it was in the border states where there was divided people. When there's an ideological division, like what happened in Spain in 1936, the war is everywhere in the country. The first thing that happened when that war started in every sizable town and city was the right-wingers and the left-wingers got out in the streets and tried to kill each other. And you can't think of anything much worse than that. Eventually battle lines formed, but throughout that war, on both sides, there was constant executions and torture behind enemy lines. So you drive around Spain, a beautiful country, a country with a wonderful history, and you see a little plaque on the side of the road, and the plaque will say, on this spot, 11 nuns were shot to death in 1937. You know, you say, I'm not going to stop anymore. That's what I've got to read. We can't draw a line in this country to separate ourselves from our fellow citizens. We have to find a way to unite. And we, are, as conservatives, are the only ones that have the principles that we can unite around. Not only the beliefs of the country, but the history of the country, the symbols of the country, the myths of the country that keep us together. Now, Ann asked me today to talk about perseverance. And I'd say, first thing we have to persevere, but why do we have to persevere? It's not simply a matter of being stubborn. We all like to get our own way. That's a human nature. And maybe it's not such a bad thing. But it's not a high motivation. And insofar as our ego and our self-interest is involved, it's not necessarily a noble motivation at all. We have to get ahead because we have something that America needs. And again, I don't have to tell you that. It's why all of you are in this room today. If you were in it to get ahead, first of all, you'd be in the other party. And second, you wouldn't be in this wing of the party that you're in. This isn't the easiest one to get ahead in. We're here because we think we believe something that everybody else needs. And perseverance is the duty that falls to us for having that truth. So we have to go on. Now, at a terrible time in our history, and just before he signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862, Lincoln sent a message to Congress, and it ended in words that I think still have meaning for us. He said, "Will not the good people respond to a united and earnest appeal from us? The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country. Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down, in honor or dishonor, to the latest generation. We, even we here, hold the power and bear the responsibility. We shall nobly save, or meanly lose, the last best hope of earth. We, even we here, hold the power and bear the responsibility." How do we find the strength to go on? And how do we identify the ideals that unite us? There's a phrase in that, Lincoln was a great writer, which is why I like to quote him, because it increases the quality of my speeches. But there's a phrase in that speech that I particularly like, which is, "We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country." You know, we think about being enthralled by a piece of music or a movie or a beautiful woman, but you don't think often about disenthralling yourself, getting yourself out of the haze that prevents you from seeing clearly. So let me say a couple of things about what I think we might be said to be enthralled to. We should not be enthralled to party. Obviously, the founders didn't want us to have parties in the first place. Our party, the Republican Party, comes out of the Whig Party. And the Whig Party was the least successful party in American history. It elected 2 presidents, both of them died in office, and both of them were succeeded by vice presidents that broke with their parties and adopted the policies of the Democrats. And the party was finally done in because it tried to straddle the issue of slavery. which they thought was smart, right? We can get people from both sides by not taking a clear position. And that attempt to straddle led to their collapse. A new party rose up, the Republican Party, which was willing to take a moral position on a political issue. And that party quickly became the dominant party of the dominant part of the country, elected a president on its second try, and had, let me see, 10 of the next 11 presidents after Lincoln were Republicans. It was a very successful party because it didn't straddle. Now, I grew up rooting for the Republican Party. I have all my life, and I still do. And I've spent a lot of time, as you know, trying to promote Republican candidates, strengthen the party, move the party in the direction I think it should go in. That said, the point of a party is what it can do for America. It's not a good in and of itself. We've got to try to make the Republican Party the tool that it needs to be to do what America and Connecticut has to have done to save itself. When the time comes to move on, as it did with the Whigs, I would move on. The time is not yet. Let me take another myth that I worry about, something that I think we need to disenthrall ourselves from. Some of you have heard me talk about this before, or Senator Sampson talk about it, because we both do. There is what I call the myth of the spectrum. And it is a strong myth within the Republican Party here in Connecticut. And this says all the voters are on a spectrum from left to right. And you've got, let's say, AOC over here and Ted Cruz over here, or something like that. And the swing voters are somewhere here in the center. And the way that a party wins is by being as close as you can to those voters who are in the center. And if we're closer to the center than the Democrats, then we'll get those voters. You know, there's things that make complete sense that just aren't true. Like the sun goes around the earth. I mean, nothing could be more obvious than the fact that the sun goes around the earth. It just doesn't happen to be true. And the myth of the spectrum is not true either. It's my conviction, and I want you to think about this and think about it going forward. Most of the people that think about politics know if they're on the left or on the right. The people in the center aren't so much moderates as they are confused or disillusioned. And the reason that Donald Trump was successful was because those people want a connection with somebody. They want somebody that they look at and say, hey, that guy is the real thing. A lot of people that voted for, I think you know this, a lot of people that voted for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primaries in 2016 voted for Donald Trump in the general election. Why? Not because they thought their politics were the same. They looked at Bernie Sanders and Hillary and said, she's a phony, but that guy believes what he's saying. Then they looked at Donald Trump and Hillary and said, she's still a phony, but that guy believes what he's saying. The most important thing in politics is not to change our positions to try to get support from people. That is giving away the very authenticity that those people are looking for. We've got to be strong in our positions, and we've got to be clear in our positions, and we've got to bring the people to us. Now, I'm going to say another myth is the idea that there is some one person out there in the world that we can put all our faith and trust in and that they are going to save us. And I've seen this party rush from person to person, convinced that this is the guy, low here and low there. And often, it doesn't, I'm not saying that they're the wrong person or they're bad people. But there is no single leader that we should turn our moral decisions over to. Prove all things. Hold fast that which is good. That's a command that Paul gave to us personally, to test things, to decide what we think is the right thing to do. And we're never going to agree individually. Not only, I don't agree, I'm sure there's nobody in this room, not even Gail, certainly not Ann, that I agree with 100% of the time. And I don't even agree with myself 100% of the time. I can look back and say I was wrong about this, right? But we've got to try to use our judgment and the light that we're given to find the policies that will work and not turn our choice over to somebody else. Another thing I think we need to disenthrall ourselves from is the idea that what we need in a leader is a manager. Republicans keep putting up men I'd say men and women too, who have good management experience. So Mitt Romney, right, by the resume. Tom Foley, Bob Stefanowski, by the resume. And I would say Trump, again, as a manager, right, has a case to be made. But it isn't about being the best manager. It's about standing for the right things. Let me say, I'm going to quote a different president, one who's kind of coming back into vogue, Calvin Coolidge. Coolidge said, boy, this is a good one too. Coolidge said, it is a great advantage to a president and a major source of safety to this country for him to know that he is not a great man. When a man begins to feel that he is the only one who can lead in this republic, he is guilty of treason to the spirit of our institutions. Now, how can someone govern, how can government be better than a man's judgment? It can only be better by relying on the guidance that the founders of this country gave us in the first place. Not in the arm of flesh, in something that has worked extraordinarily well for us for centuries. We're in a situation, this country is like a magnificent house that has fallen into disrepair. And anybody who says we should knock it down and build a new one is crazy. And anyone who says we need to completely renovate this house and change it into something else and change the lines and change everything, no. What we have to do is restore the house and put it back in order again, just the way it was insofar as we can. Another thing I think we're enthralled by is the idea that politics should just be a matter of dollars and cents. That if we just talk about fiscal issues, we can win elections and that's all there is to it. Too many of the Republicans that talk about that don't really have the nerve to take a strong stand on the fiscal issues when the push comes to shove. I'm all for fiscal issues, I think it's very important. But man does not live by bread alone. That statement, not by bread alone, I mean I can say that casually, but I ask you to think about it seriously and where it comes from and what it means. There is a higher purpose in this life than consumption. There's a greater good than prosperity. And we are born yearning for it, every single one of us, for spiritual fulfillment. Freedom, again, as Eric Metaskis was talking about, which gives us the chance to pursue that spiritual fulfillment, is the best political issue that we have, if we have the nerve to embrace it. We need conviction so profound that we don't anger. We need to be confident in what we have, and we need to be above it enough that we can not simply answer our opponents coolly, but that we can answer them with humor. Because there's no better weapon. And the craziness that they're purporting to support now demands that we use humor against them and make the world see just how ridiculous what they're talking about. When we are disenthralled, what do we see? We get past the static of the times. We go back to the central premise of this country and the solution to our current problems, which are found in those simple documents on which it was founded. And to my mind, they come down to two words: limited government. Government that stays in its lane, stays out of our lives. The other important things, if I'm talking about a Republican platform, limited government, personal liberty, fiscal responsibility. But the personal liberty and the fiscal responsibility follow from limited government. They follow from government acknowledging what it needs to do and what it never should do. Fortunately, you do not have to be a great person to be a good politician in this country, because there's not enough great people to do it. We have the blueprint to follow. We don't have to make it up. Insofar as I was effective in politics in Connecticut, it was because I was able to do three things, three very simple things. I figured out what I truly believed. I didn't do it overnight. Mark mentioned that I was in and out of politics. I came back to politics knowing what I truly believed. But I knew what I believed. I needed to find a way to state that as clearly as I possibly could. And I needed to stick to it. That's it. There was nothing else, there's nothing else needed, and there's nothing else that's needed for any of us. I'm not perfect. I needed a nudge now and then. I had Senator Sampson with me up at the Capitol to nudge me, and sometimes as well. But what we have to preach as a gospel is a simple gospel. And I would say also, as the Lord said to Peter, when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. And that, within the Republican Party, is what I think this assembly is attempting to do. That's the goal of this group. It's why I'm happy to be with you here today. And I would ask that you would trust, as Lincoln asked us to trust, that right makes might. And that we can go forward with clarity, with courage, and with faith. Thank you.
Joe Markley, everyone. Thank you.